Hey everyone, I'm Sage Man, welcoming you back to The Little Mermaid Retrospective. This is the 9th episode of this retrospective, and I'm discussing the last 4 episodes of the Little Mermaid TV series. Just in case you're coming in right at the end and need a recap, these Disney TV series retrospectives, of which The Little Mermaid is the first series I'm covering, are part of the Keys and Kingdoms project, currently a segment in Season 1 of this channel's podcast, but soon to be spun off into a podcast all their own. Keys and Kingdoms is a role-playing game setting and fantasy universe I'm creating, which is meant to take inspiration from all things Disney, and I'm watching a massive amount of Disney content in order to collect ideas. This being the last installment in which I watch Little Mermaid episodes, the 10th and final Little Mermaid retrospective will be about looking back on the entire series and discussing what ideas it could provide for the Keys and Kingdoms universe. These Little Mermaid retrospectives are easily the biggest content on the channel, most of them having thousands of views, while every other video on the channel has, well, less than 150. And I'll acknowledge that maybe views shouldn't really be counted that way because most people start watching a Little Mermaid retrospective and then, turn it off within 10 seconds, but some don't. Most of them have a pretty good thumbs up to thumbs down ratio, and I assume the retrospectives are the reason the subscriber count has more than doubled in the past couple of months. We're up to, 55 subscribers as of right now? It's pretty crazy. Yeah, I assume most of those subscribers are here for the Little Mermaid retrospective rather than anything I'm actually proud of. Just kind of the way it goes when you're a creator. I really thought the retrospective that features Land of the Dinosaurs would blow up like crazy, but as of today, it's by far the least popular of the 8 episodes. Strange. Give it time. The most popular of the retrospectives is the 6th one, I imagine because it has Gabriella in the thumbnail. I imagine that retrospective 8, with the dinosaur on the cover, will outstrip some of the others eventually. It is an iconic episode people are going to want to hear about. Still, with all these subscribers, why are over half of them anonymous accounts, thus not notifying me when I hit milestones like 50? It's a bit odd. Why does the channel almost never get comments from anyone I don't know personally? It kind of makes me feel like all these new subscribers are like bots somehow. I guess I should be grateful for bots that don't leave comments, I guess, but it's lonely. It's so fucking lonely. If you are a human subscriber to this channel, leave comments. I'm not asking for the sake of an algorithm boost. I don't care about that. I'm asking for my sanity, so I don't die of loneliness in a sea of silent and anonymous viewers. That's so much worse than having no viewers at all. On a more cheerful note, it is hot as hell in this apartment. Summer is most assuredly on its way here in Quincy, so I'm turning my damn fan on. I'm sorry. I'll put it as far away as I possibly can, but it's powerful. You'll probably hear it. It won't kill you to listen to a podcast with an audio issue like that. It builds character. After this, it's gargoyles, and when we recorded that a year and a half ago, there were heaters and air filters about, so, prepare yourself. And with that out of the way, let's start the show properly. The second half of Season 3, the final 4 episodes of the series. First episode of the day is entitled Heroes, so I'm anticipating a plotline with the message of never meet your heroes. The summary speaks of a legendary hero called Apollo. Okay then. You get used to the quality of television animation after a while, but then a YouTuber I follow a ton of movie reaction channels, and they all seem to go on Disney kicks. And one recently did a reaction of the movie The Little Mermaid, and the difference is, it's rather stark. The episode wastes no time, Triton immediately receiving the news of Apollo, hero of the Sargasso Wars, returning to Atlantica. Merfolk Wars? Now there's an idea right away. I imagine them fought with such primitive tools. I've always seen merfolk as primitive and pastoral sort of people. And Sargasso, a sea in the western Atlantic named for sargassum, a distinctive brown algae that forms massive floating seaweed colonies where all sorts of creatures hide. How cool is that? Not a bad place for a small aquatic settlement that kind of floats around, perhaps. So Apollo is, kind of a historical figure from Ariel's perspective, being a warrior in Triton's armies long before even any of her sisters were born, fighting an invasion of the Sargasso's resident aquatic people, the Octopins. I'm picturing Cecilia, Ursula's race, and in the flashback, yeah, pretty similar. Little thing about Cecilia culture might be found in this here flashback. So far, I'm just getting that they're warlike and xenophobic, but hey, sometimes that's all you need as a baseline for a fantasy culture. The Octopins, they have the same basic anatomy as Ursula, but they're much darker in color, possibly because all those we see are male. And their hairdos remind me of Wolverine from the X-Men. Good imagery. They also use what appear to be tonfas, wooden batons originally from China, often used in Japanese martial arts, though they're not holding them right. While the Atlanticans, the merfolk, they have nice swords, helmets, many of them have clamshell-shaped golden shields. A few wear breastplates, but most go bare-chested. I guess you have to be important to get actual armor. All good inspirational notes for merfolk equipment. If merfolk get access to, technology more advanced than what I usually picture them with, smithing and such. Ooh, and the Octopins, they have a guy armed with a trident. And he goes trident to trident with Triton. Gosh, the Octopins even resemble Ursula enough that they have octopus skin covering their chests as well, just like Ursula's skin resembles an evening dress. Now, not going to do that with Cecilia in K&K. They're going to be octopus from the waist down, similar to merfolk, so Ursula would actually have to wear a top if she were to appear in G-rated content. And, oh, hey, holy cow, there's Ursula herself. These are her people. Her race. I try not to say race anymore in regards to fantasy peoples. I'm trying to settle into using people instead, because species just sounds too scientific, but I don't know. Sometimes it's less impactful to say people. I don't know. So Ursula in universe is not a Cecilia, but an Octopin. How about that? Can you tell I write these scripts while watching the episode and don't do much to, edit them later? Because obviously, I was surprised when I saw Ursula, but that was hours ago. Obviously, I was not expressing genuine surprise just now. That was all performative, based on how I felt when I saw the episode, which was not just now. Anyway, not sure what role Ursula is playing in this conflict, but the point of the story is Apollo, who hides among the Sargassum to ambush the trident-wielding Octopin general and disarm him, allowing the merfolk to regain the advantage and rout the invaders. Not sure what Ursula's role in this conflict was. We just see her observing it, but I'm sure she'll be in more of the episode to resolve that. I'm calling it right now, based on Apollo's expression in this flashback, that he wasn't hiding so he could jump the enemy leader. No, he was just hiding, and the ambush was somehow an accident. And he's been hating himself for all these years because his cowardice was rewarded as heroism. I'm calling it. Even though I'm saying this hours after watching the episode, I'm calling it now. I wrote that down 3 minutes into the episode. Would I lie to you? Back in the present, Triton explains that Apollo has spent his years exploring the seas. He returns and is hailed as a hero. Ursula scries on the event from her lair, remarking that she certainly owes Apollo big revenge for his role in thwarting the Octopin invasion. Apollo is voiced by Ron Perlman. That's awesome! He says he just wanted to stop in Atlantica briefly, see home again. He's very uncomfortable about all the hero hailing going on. After his brief stay here, he'd like to find Valhalla, spiritual home of the Mer-Vikings. Mer-Vikings. Fuck you, writers. Mer-Vikings, I ask you. Who ever thought that would be non-stupid? Though, hey, I do like a mix of Greek and Norse mythological themes. A guy named Apollo searching for Valhalla. If you know anything about the cosmology of Keys and Kingdoms, you know I just live for that sort of thing. Ariel and Flounder are interested in joining Apollo on this quest, and Triton figures this is the best possible thing he can do for Ariel's insatiable adventuring spirit. If she travels with the mighty heroic Apollo, she'll be safe as can be and will learn valuable wilderness survival skills. Apollo is reluctant because he's a fraud, but it seems he can't bring himself to admit it. So they're on board. Gosh, Ron Perlman sounds young in this. I mean, this aired 27 years ago, so he was a lot younger. I guess I just kind of assumed he's always sounded like the Ron Perlman I know. But no, he's just getting older, I guess. Wow, Ron Perlman is in his 70s? I did not know that. Okay. But he's doing it awesomely. He's an awesome old guy. Sebastian in this episode is seemingly reduced to nothing but a running gag about wanting to make a speech welcoming Apollo home. The first peril they run into, slow sand. It's like quicksand, only slower. Apollo's exact words. Fuck you, writers. still, quicksand. That is a classic peril in adventure stories. I'm for having it there as an inspiration. Flounder pulls Ariel out of the sand, and he and Ariel together are strong enough to save Apollo. He applauds their courage, and with Ursula continuously scrying on them, they proceed on the legendary path to Valhalla. A path traveled only by the bravest heroes, a path from which no merfolk have ever returned. Next peril is the Funnels of Fury, a series of volcanic geysers. Ariel gets them through it by memorizing the patterns of the eruptions. It's all very video gamey, and by this point Apollo is rather aghast that they've made it this far alive, but he's keeping his brave face on as much as he can. Soon they do indeed arrive at Valhalla, an uninteresting looking undersea construction of some sort. I don't know, it's pretty indistinct, but soon the three of them are captured and imprisoned by the Mer Vikings, who, as it turns out, are more the evil and hairy, rape, pillage, and burn kind of Vikings rather than the majestic heroes of Valhalla type. In the Mer Vikings' prison, Apollo comes clean that he's not who they think he is. Not only was he hiding in the Sargassum out of pure fear, he got all tangled up in it too. His dropping down upon the general from above was just him falling because he was too entangled to swim. His wanderings ever since have been just to avoid the public eye, to avoid having to face the public and tell the truth. He does not generally wander to any place exciting. Meanwhile, Ursula has told the Octopans that Atlantica is no longer defended by Apollo. They have a chance to return. The general says they're gonna attack again after 4,000 tides. Okay. A tide is how long? Is it like a full phase of the moon? Makes 4,000 tides over 300 years. Okay, so not that. Maybe a tide is a day, so 10 years. So that's a bit more logical, but Triton said that the war happened before any of Ariel's sisters were born, so it would have been more than 20 years ago, surely. I'm going to Google how long a tide is. It's 12 hours. Okay, that's not better. The war absolutely did not happen only 5 years ago. Tides are a horrible way to keep track of long periods of time. Fuck you, writers. As for the Octopan General, who gets lines now, is that Clancy Brown? Oh man, Ron Perlman and Clancy Brown in one episode? Way to spoil us with just the best dark and gritty voice actors. Very similar guys, Ron Perlman and Clancy Brown, just super intense and gruff character actors who do a lot of voice work. Looks like they have done a number of animated series together, nothing that I've ever seen, so this is pretty exciting. Ursula, it transpires, was the one who gave the Octopan General the trident last time. She explains that the tridents she fashions with her magic aren't as powerful as tritons. If dropped, they cannot mentally be called back to hand the way Triton can with his. And the flashback showed that, one snapping in half the moment it was dropped, so clear. I assume Triton's trident isn't that destructible, but Ursula's been waiting a long time for this, so she creates 8 of them, sure to overwhelm Triton through pure power. Back in Valhalla, the Mer Vikings, most of them played by Jim Cummings, a few by Clancy Brown, all in absurd Scandinavian accents, discuss how they'll be executing their intruders, but the chieftain, played by Cummings, recognizes Apollo from the statues and legends and agrees to let these prisoners go, if Apollo can slay the terrible sea dragon who's been menacing Valhalla. Said sea dragon looks nearly identical to Dragon Maleficent without even any aquatic adaptations. I mean, that's a super fun reference, but come on, you could still do that, but tweaking it a little, making it look like a sea dragon instead of a regular dragon, The Octopans advance on Atlantica again, and Triton goes out to meet them as he did 20 years ago, apparently. There we go, a time period we can actually parse. I assume he's rounding down, because if Ariel is in her mid-teens and has 6 elder sisters, most of them have to be older than 20, right? Or maybe merfolk always have multiple births, and the 7 sisters are all in fact very close in age, Ariel being the youngest only by a matter of minutes. I don't fucking know, just a super random thought I had. Nyeh. Ariel and Flounder evade the sea dragon, while Apollo flees the lair at first. But when he hears Flounder crying for help, he takes one of the whips wielded by the Mer Vikings and charges back in, using it to ensnare and capture the sea dragon. The Mer Vikings sing his praises in the streets of Valhalla. Literally, it's a teeny tiny but insanely catchy musical number. So the Mer Vikings, they look mostly like ordinary merfolk, but they all sport a pair of bull horns. seemingly not on helmets like the stereotypical Viking, but actually part of their bodies. It's hard to tell. I'm not fond of that design. The real Vikings, they never had those horned helmets. Incidentally, putting big bull horns on a helmet is a very poor tactical decision. It makes it heavy, unbalances you, it's harder to pass through openings, easier for your enemy to grapple you. No, rather, those were drinking horns. What the advantage is to drinking out of a horn-shaped cup, I don't know, but it's generally believed that the archaeologists who dug up Viking helmets and drinking horns initially believed that they went together somehow, so a little misconception. Back in Atlantica, the merfolk are being overwhelmed by the multiple trident-wielding octopins, but they're driven back by Apollo swooping in on the back of the sea dragon. Ursula curses another failure, but swears she will have that trident again. After the parade in honor of Apollo and his two companions, Apollo thanks Ariel for helping him find his courage. He sets off on another adventure, one he thinks he'll actually enjoy this time. Having the sea dragon to protect him undoubtedly helps, as does having earned his heroic reputation. Now, seemingly, he never does come clean to anyone else that he didn't deserve it from the beginning. So, I mean, considering the fact that I made a running gag out of telling the writers of this episode to fuck off, it was actually really good. Just, some minor elements annoyed me, but overall, it was a solid-ass episode featuring two of the greatest possible guest actors a cartoon can have, and something I never expected, lore about Ursula's species. Lore about a ton of things, honestly. I enjoyed that thoroughly. Next episode is called The Beast Within, and it appears to be a werewolf episode, with Flounder being the poor guy who turns into a werewolf. Freaking sweet. We open with Urchin and Ariel riding around on squid cycles, escorting Sebastian to the palace to celebrate his anniversary, 25 years as the king's advisor. Triton has completely forgotten the special day and gives Sebastian a gaudy trophy a friend gave him that he's been trying to get rid of. I feel like these episodes are never really about what Ariel is doing. It's always about what somebody else is doing, and Ariel's just there making observations. It's true of a lot of episodes. Not all of them, just enough that it stands out that our title, Little Mermaid, doesn't get much focus. Anyway, Ariel leads the way on an adventure to gather gemstones in Quaking Canyon. The location is aptly named. A little on the nose, I think. There's a cave-in. A lot of other boring nonsense, and soon here it comes. The Howling Hairfish, our massive wolf-like monster who bites Flounder on the tail. Sebastian dragging his trophy around everywhere he goes proves an incredibly annoying nuisance. Way to write Sebastian into the episode, and they take cover in a small side passage. Urchin throwing the trophy at the hairfish to slow it down. The monster chews the thing up. The presence of some passing sea snakes reveals an exit, and they take it. Sea snakes kick ass. You don't hear about them often. They're venomous snakes in the ocean. That's just, yay. Can you beat that? That's pretty awesome. It's not long after they exit the cave, but under, I guess, full moon light, kinda, sorta, if that extends under the... Anyway, Flounder turns into a howling hairfish himself. I like what they did here. I think for one brief second, they allowed Eden Gross to use his natural voice to herald the transformation, while he's presumably had to put on a childish affectation for all of Season 3, at least. Like I say, characters who are voiced by, little boys who are voice actors, they don't usually hold on to a character for 3 whole years, because their voices change. But yeah, I like it when they do keep them on, and let them have tiny moments like that, where they use their natural, growing speaking voice. Hairfish Flounder attacks a village full of medieval peasant merfolk? Huh? Apparently they're trying to lean into the old Universal horror kind of atmosphere, and sure enough, an angry mob forms to hunt the hairfish down. One portly old villager, played unsurprisingly by Jim Cummings, wants to see a fortune teller about the cure for hairfishism, I guess. The rest of the village ignores him, but Ariel, Sebastian, and Urchin decide to follow him and see where he's going with all that. The portly gentleman leads his secret pursuers into a deep chasm, as Sebastian keeps harping on about how Urchin destroyed his trophy. Once away from the village, Flounder changes back into himself and frets about what Ariel's gotten him into. A trio of sharks pursue him into a shipwreck, and high adrenaline, it seems, turns him back into the hairfish, which easily fights the sharks off. Flounder changes back into himself just as the mob closes in on him, seemingly unable to trigger the transformation against semi-innocent villagers. I'm a little bit at a loss as to what the rules are here. I guess the usual panicky villager assumption of having to kill the innocent fish so he doesn't become a hairfish again. They lock him in a cage aboard the shipwreck. I don't think paranoid merfolk villagers would explore a human wreck like that. Anyway, yeah, they don't kill him. They just promise to drop the cage down a bottomless pit if he transforms again. After a shockingly long journey, the portly villager finally makes his way to the fortune teller's home, and forgiveness seems to be the theme the episode is going with, introducing it a ton of times in rapid succession, a little over halfway through the episode. Ariel hopes Flounder will forgive her for getting him into this mess, while Sebastian's refusal to drop Urchin's destruction of the trophy has led Urchin to vow he'll never forgive Sebastian for all the nagging. Immediately, the fortune teller, who appears to be a sea slug of some sort with a thick Eastern European accent, not the cartoonish kind of sea slugs we've seen throughout the franchise, but a semi-realistic sea slug. If you've never seen one, sea slugs are actually usually very vibrantly colored and elegant and beautiful. So anyway, she declares she'll never forgive the villagers for persecuting her and sends the villager on his way. Ariel, Urchin, and Sebastian, however, she's willing to help. They didn't do anything to wrong her. She explains that the hairfish was brought about by a curse cast over the village by a witch long ago, and the afflicted can be cured by a bath of silver mist. And she displays a quick image of that in her crystal ball. Our trio wonder what this silver mist could be. A magic spell? An ocean current? It moved like a living thing. And Ariel realizes it must have been a school of tiny silver fish that inhabit the area. Meanwhile, Flounder's adrenaline has gotten hold of him and he transforms back into the hairfish. Now, so the villagers start to pitch the ship over the edge. Ariel arrives, leading the school of tiny silver fish, but it's too late. The ship tumbles into the bottomless pit with all our heroes in it. It does hit bottom fairly soon, so much for bottomless pit. So they find Flounder, the silverfish circle him to cure him, and they ascend. Flounder is admittedly pretty angry at Ariel for getting him into such a dangerous situation, but when she apologizes sincerely, he forgives her. Sebastian admits that if Flounder can forgive that, his trophy probably isn't worth losing Urchin over, and Urchin and Sebastian make amends. After which, Urchin casually admits where it really came from, which is excessively mean. Sebastian confronts Triton about the deception, and forgives him. Yay, morals. Okay, 3 guest stars today. I wanted to make sure Flounder was still played by Eden Gross. He is indeed. The Bradley Pierce thing is a myth. It's a myth, I say, and Danny Cooksey remains Urchin. The other 2 guest stars being Jim Cummings and Linda Gary, who I guess were all of the villagers. Well, maybe not all. Maybe Ken Mars did a few of them. I don't know. He doesn't often do additional voices, despite being a voice actor in his own right. But yeah, you don't see Ken Mars doing additional voices in this show very often. As for Linda Gary, then she was thus most assuredly the fortune teller. I'm not terribly familiar with her. I know she's Littlefoot's grandma in, I think, just the first few Land Before Time sequels is how that went, because I know they changed around a lot of the cast after, like, the 4th Land Before Time film. I don't know. But yeah, Linda Gary, I know she does that, and a few other things. I mean, her voice acting career goes way back, for sure. So, I like a good moral about forgiveness. I love a good universal horror pastiche. And the Sea Slug Fortune Teller was pretty awesome. I don't feel like it was all executed well. Flashy but unremarkable episode. Did I mention that Hairfish Flounder chews up some pottery and then spits bullets at the villagers? I should have, because that was a weird way to contrive G-rated werewolf carnage. Next episode is called Ariel's Treasures. I remember this one. Gabriella is in it, and so is Ursula, and an evil egg beater whisk thingy. We open on a huge crowd cheering on King Triton just for fucking showing up, I guess. He's on his way to a conference of some sort, and Ursula hopes to use this opportunity to strike. And perhaps for the first time, she thinks Ariel might be the key to Triton's undoing. I'm directly quoting the movie with that line, of course. Prequels are hard, you gotta think of cool stuff that happened before the story started. But no matter what you do, it won't be that cool, because if it was really cool, it would have been what the original story was about. Oh, hey, I didn't know Prince Eric was in this episode. And so is Chef Louis. How about that? Ah, of course, I had forgotten. Up on Prince Eric's ship, Louis is making some food, and he accidentally drops his egg beater whisk thingy out the window into the sea. Holy fuck, somebody set the wrong background into this shot. That is not the egg beater falling out of Prince Eric's ship. It just fell out the window of a modern office building. What the shit? Okay, anyway, yeah, the egg beater. It falls into the sea and Ariel instantly scoops it up. She turns the crank. She's not sure what it's for, but it's entertaining, and she calls it the Whirly Twirly. Later on, Ariel hangs out with Gabriella in the grotto, and I've been intrigued about seeing this episode, and I'll tell you why. As I alluded earlier, I remember this episode. I saw it as a kid, and I did not pick up on the fact that Gabriella is deaf. I only learned that later from reading about the series. And I'm wondering, why I didn't notice. I surely I would have noticed something was off. The fact that she doesn't talk, that she signs and then Ollie speaks on her behalf. I don't recall noticing anything of the sort. Just seeing Ariel hanging out with a mermaid and octopus, I just didn't recognize. I suspect maybe I just wasn't paying attention, but I'm also wondering if maybe they just kind of played it really cool. Gabriella has already had her introductory episode where her motivation revolved around her deafness, but now that she's no longer seeking to magically overcome it and is perfectly functional in ordinary conversation, maybe there's no need for it to come up. She can just be Gabriella. I like the idea that it's possible for an entire episode to go by without the viewer picking up on it, but no, I think I just wasn't paying attention. I hardly remember this episode's plot anyway. Maybe I just don't remember noticing she was deaf. Already I forgot that Prince Eric was in this episode, so there's that. Anyway, Ariel and Gabriella have decided to use the whirly-twirly to curl their hair, getting some pretty outrageous styles out of it. Sebastian is judgmental of Ariel's collection. As I may have mentioned before, another minor continuity issue in that the movie seems to be the first time Sebastian has ever seen Ariel's collection, as he's shocked and appalled by it there, right? I mean, it's not nearly as bad as the Hercules TV series. So remember in the movie, Hades only learns about Hercules at the start of the second act, and Hercules only learns that Hades exists at the start of the third act. But for the entire series, Hades and young Hercules are perfectly aware of each other, even though that was very much not the case in the film. So, anyway. Ariel whips out the ballerina from Gabriella's introductory episode, and Ollie remains completely off-screen until Gabriella has something to say. That would be a bit alarming if you didn't know he was always by her side. It's just an octopus coming out of nowhere. Ursula, spying on the grotto via Flotsam and Jetsam's magical eyes, decides to start her plan by turning Ariel's human treasures evil, starting with the whirly-twirly. At her command, it glows purple and starts zipping around, drilling through solid stone as it buzzes all over and heads for Atlantica. It zips all over the kingdom and wrecks shit, and Ursula arrives and holds the kingdom for ransom. They either make her queen and she breaks the spell, or the whirly-twirly keeps rampaging. But Ariel and Gabriella use lots of seaweed to clog the gears and make it stop spinning. I don't know if that would work. The thing's been drilling through stone, so... But it does work. Ursula heads home, and Ariel immediately picks up on how this rampage must have been entirely Ursula's doing. And she goes back to the grotto to make sure the rest of her stuff hasn't been tampered with. Ursula starts cursing more of the treasures. A chess knight, a cuckoo clock, a rolling pin, an umbrella, even the spinning ballerina. All of it comes to life, forms a cyclone, which likewise heads to Atlantica. Ariel sends Gabriella and Ollie ahead to evacuate Atlantica, while Ariel, Sebastian, and Flounder go to Ursula's lair, because they know where that is, I guess. Though interestingly, Ariel apparently doesn't know her name, only ever calling her the Sea Witch throughout the episode. Even though in the movie she's told Ursula's name and is instantly like, the Sea Witch? Ariel rifles through Ursula's possessions and enlists the help of the small worm Ursula uses as lipstick, and is told Ursula's plan. Ariel recognizes the big orange potion bottle Ursula had on hand when she volunteered to stop the whirly-twirly, and grabs it. Ursula once again offers the Atlanticans to make it all stop, but Ariel hurls the orange potion into the cyclone, stopping it and scattering all of her treasures to various corners, some of it being blasted all the way out of the water and landing on Eric's ship. Annoyed, Ursula takes the defeat and leaves. Ariel mourns her largely destroyed collection, but isn't averse to starting up a new collection of both human things and memories of finding them with her friends. End credits? Well, no unexpected guest stars, just Pat Carroll as Ursula, Whit Hertford as Ollie, and Rene Auberjonois returning from the movie as Louis. No Patty Edwards. Flotsam and Jetsam had a tiny bit of dialogue in this episode. Maybe it was reused from an earlier episode. The pair of them definitely do not get much FaceTime in the series, sometimes not talking, sometimes just not being there when Ursula is the antagonist of an episode, and never doing very much even when they are playing the henchman role to Ursula. And okay, I gotta say, my child self is vindicated. You really wouldn't know Gabriella is deaf if you've seen this episode and not her debut episode. She has one line of dialogue in the episode, in which she says that the dancing ballerina is her favorite item in the grotto. And as she's swimming toward the item at the time, it may be easy to miss that she's signing and that Ollie is speaking on her behalf when he says that. Otherwise, a viewer might find it odd that Gabriella is silent for the entire episode, but I found that for a lot of people, the character trait of doesn't talk much isn't especially noticeable unless a character points it out or it's implemented really awkwardly, especially if the ensemble is fairly large. Ollie has very little dialogue himself in the episode, so yeah, if you're not looking for it, I don't think a viewer would notice that Gabriella is mute, certainly not that she's deaf. They might wonder what the heck her deal is, because Gabriella and Ollie don't really add anything of value to this episode that Ariel, Sebastian, and Flounder couldn't have done themselves, so yeah, that's a bit disappointing, the superfluousness there. I'd have liked Gabby to have had something to actually do in her second and final appearance in the show, but apart from bringing back a guest star and not having a clue what to do with her, this was a fun episode. It was simple and made good use of existing elements we actually like about the overall franchise, such as having Ursula as an adversary, Ariel's treasures playing a big role, and even a little cameo from the human cast. Solid penultimate episode. And now we come to the final episode called A Little Evil. Is that about orgasms? No, that's a little death. Sorry. A Little Evil. Tim Curry's Evil Manta returns for the series finale after having been absent for the entirety of seasons 2 and 3, I think, right? I remember this episode well. I remember well the storylines of both characters who accompany the Evil Manta in this episode, one being the Brain Sponge and the other being the titular Little Evil. Though, as I think I mentioned in a previous retrospective, I was very surprised recently when scanning the plot summaries to figure out how many episodes the Evil Manta appeared in. I discovered that Little Evil and the Brain Sponge are both from the same episode, and that shocked me. They both stand on their own so well as characters that I guess my memory is gonna pull them apart. I remember kind of the ridiculousness of the Manta's evilness in this episode. Remember in his first appearances, the Manta's objective was to start race riots, not to give him any power over anyone else, but purely because prejudice is evil, and he was defeated by music because music is good. Captain Planet shit. Other appearances downplayed this, still called him the Evil Manta, but at least gave him objectives. This episode back to having his entire worldview revolve around being evil. And that's kind of silly, but, maybe that kind of mindset has its place in fiction. Let's see what we can learn here. We open on an art class taught by Sebastian and attended by Urchin, silent in this episode, and Flounder and Ariel, all of them focusing on sculpture, though Ariel is lacking in inspiration. And scene over. Okay. We now transfer over to the Evil Manta and his son. How'd he get a son when he's seemingly a unique individual and had been imprisoned for centuries when we first met him in Season 1? Who the fuck knows? Anyway, his son is known only as, is named, apparently, a Little Evil. He's a tiny and adorable version of the Evil Manta. I'm not crazy of that single strand of hair thing he's got going on, but otherwise his design is impeccable for the story he's telling. He has all the menace of his species, but also a childlike innocence about him. Kind of resembles Casper the Friendly Ghost, don't you think? And I do so love it when supernatural characters have no pupils in their eyes. I've had a thing for that design trope ever since D&D 4th edition, which used it generously, and I guess I like it when it's applied as a species trait rather than a sign that an individual has turned to supernatural evil. Little Evil is played by... I have no clue. The Disney Wiki doesn't say anything about the voice actors for Little Evil or the Brain Sponge, and IMDb attributes the role of Little Evil to both J.D. Daniels and Bradley Pierce. Guess I have to wait for the episode's actual credits to find out who the heck our guest stars are today. I hope this episode doesn't have the wrong credits like the Season 1 finale did. The Manta tries to teach his son how to menace and intimidate the populace. He's not exceptional at it, but he's getting there. And the Manta takes the kid to his evil man cave. Not actually called that, but something pretty close to that. Showing him some evil memorabilia, including the Evil Eye, a sinister item with both magical and mechanical properties, which shows him good and pure things that need to be evilized. Yeah, evilized. In fact, yeah, that eye is a lot like that telescoping window that Hawkmoth has up in his tower. Huh. I haven't watched Miraculous in some time. I wonder what sort of plot developments it's been seeing. Anyway, the evil eye never actually comes into play in the plot. I wrote it down because it was a big thing. I assumed it would, but no, it didn't. Okay. Meanwhile, Ariel and Flounder swim around, searching for inspiration for her art project. They come upon Little Evil tormenting a catfish and stop him. I wondered about his scale. He's about the same size as Ariel, despite being a very small child, so that makes sense that he'll grow up into a giant evil manta. Ariel is intrigued, thinking, no one's ever made artwork of an evil manta before. She brings him back to class, and he poses for her. Now, I'm sure you are wondering, and yes, Little Evil does have catchphrases. What else do you expect of a child character debuting in the final episode? Of course he's getting all Cousin Oliver up in this shit. He has zappers, which, is the exact example of used by terrible writing advice for a terrible catchphrase. And also, sounds great, can't wait. That's not that bad. Those are actually decent catchphrases that actually, mean something and suit the character, Little Evil takes an interest in art himself, but is thrown off when told that he's good at it. He doesn't want to feel good, he wants to feel evil. It's Skeletor said that, I believe. But Ariel and Sebastian recognize his raw artistic talent, and soon he's learning to make etchings in stone with his electric tail. That evening, the evil manta tucks his boy into bed. Now, how could it possibly get any better than this? The final musical number of the series being a villainous lullaby rocked by Tim Curry. It's a little cheesy, it has that weird trope that songs do when they take place under the sea of trying to name as many fish species as possible and rhyme them. So I don't like that, but it's hard to mess up the overall concept of the song. The evil lullaby, the Tim Curry evil lullaby. It kicks all sorts of ass. Curry even hits a couple of falsetto notes. That's not something I've heard before. After bedtime, the manta is a bit unsettled by his son's newfound politeness and artistic interests. That's not very evil. And he quickly recognizes Ariel from his son's etchings and knows who he has to target to get this to stop. In the dead of night, he makes his way to the art classroom, and seeing his son's additional etchings there and the sculpture Ariel made of Little Evil, he smashes the whole joint to pieces. And in the morning, he vows to quash his son's delightful little artistic imagination, sending Maury, of all the characters, to be back for the finale. Does that mean Maury has appeared in one episode every season? I do believe so. Neat. So he sends Maury to deliver a letter to Ariel. Okay, not where I thought that was going. I thought he was going to buy something from Maury, but no. The brain sponge is already in his possession, a creature shaped like a jet black brain with red eyes and a terrifying toothy maw. Now that is an abomination if I've ever seen one. Oh boy. The brain sponge regularly declares, "I thirst for imagination." No, not that scary. Its voice is not nearly as scary as I remember as a kid. Hate it when that happens, don't you? When something just wasn't as good as you thought when you were a kid. So yeah, the evil manta is bringing a monster to eat Ariel's brain. Fuck, that's hardcore. Back at the art school, Sebastian suspects it was Little Evil who destroyed the room, and the letter says that Little Evil wants to meet with Ariel at a place called Cobra Cave. Didn't expect that either. I was expecting the manta had just forged an evil breakup letter to her, but no, makes more sense as an actual plot moving forward thing. He's luring her to a secluded location where she will get her brain eaten. Got it. So yeah, Maury doesn't do much in this episode, but, I'm very grateful that at least Urchin doesn't have any dialogue in this episode, because it spares us from the fact that Urchin refers to Maury as Maury the Eel every time he refers to him, so yeah. The evil manta traps her in Cobra Cave, and he actually brings his son along to watch him do the evil stuff. Little Evil is not terribly enthusiastic about it all, and before his dad can bring back the brain sponge, he frees her, and they hide in a valley full of floating clouds of octopus ink. Ooh, that's nice and atmospheric, though I don't know how long ink lasts. Would it float in a valley enough to be like a permanent geographical feature? I don't think so, but it sounds cool. The brain sponge is so eager to feast on Ariel's mind that it breaks free of the chains in which the manta has bound it. And after a tense escape scene through the valley, Little Evil is confronted by his father and Ariel by the slavering brain sponge. How do you drool underwater? Ariel, in perhaps her best moment of guile in the entire series, manages to talk her way out, persuading the brain sponge that what he really thirsts for is the imagination of someone evil. She convinces it, and naturally he instantly turns against the manta and starts eating his brain. Without hesitation, Ariel helps Little Evil save his dad's life, and they kill the brain sponge by crushing it under a giant boulder, sending black goo splattering everywhere. I forgot, that's fucking awesome. The evil manta is surprised at Ariel's mercy and is humble and silent when Ariel and Little Evil discuss continuing with his art classes. That's it. That's the whole series. End credits. Okay, as I suspected, Bradley Pierce was Little Evil. That makes sense to me. I figured it couldn't have been J.D. Daniels, because this was the same year as the first season of Gargoyles, and J.D. sounds a good deal older in that. And as I also suspected, the only other guest star in the episode is Dave Coulier. He was on board for his brief appearance as Maury, so they had him play the brain sponge as well. No King Triton in this episode. And I just realized Dave Coulier wasn't in the credits of the Howling Hairfish episode, even though Dudley was in that episode. You can't trust the credits of this show. That was a hell of a finale. Even if it's not really a finale, it doesn't end the story or anything. It's just another episode in an episodic series which happened to be the last episode ever produced. But regardless, they went out on one that was truly excellent. In conclusion, well, as I said, that was the whole series. For my final thoughts on the whole show, I'll save those for the final retrospective, in which I'll look back on every episode and sum up what kind of Keys and Kingdoms material I gained from it. I'll see you then, hopefully in only a couple of weeks. I'm really hoping to wrap this up quickly and get Tapas Phase 2 started. TAPAS and Stuff Productions is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon, including Knight Sadie Allen.